in Libya, Al-Qaeda and ISIS came together because they had a mutual enemy, which was the Libyan National Army. And actually, just a couple months ago, one of our most senior terrorists from the Benghazi attacks, his name is Hashim Abu Sidra, was detained in Libya. The interesting part is it hasn't made the U.S. press, but you know what's really interesting about him? At the time he was detained, he was the head of ISIS in Libya, and he was the head of the operational side of Al-Qaeda in Libya. So see how this is now against narratives, right? He was basically the operational head of two groups that you're told don't work together.
Whoa. How are you getting this information?
We are kind of the only ones who work Benghazi, so we actually have a lot of people even just proactively reach out to us now too and say, hey, here's what's happening.
Do you think the government has rectified that segmenting people into this is ISIS, this is Al-Qaeda, this is Taliban?
Of course
this
not.
This is Hamas? It's still compartmentalized.
100%.
Man, that's a real shame. Wow. The next question is from Brody. In your opinion, are we more likely to suffer an attack on infrastructure like power grid, water supply, etc., or an attack on human life or soft targets? What group is most likely to and has the resources to pull off such an attack?
It's almost two different things, right? Like the terrorists focus on the soft targets. It's almost like the nation state in the near peer who focus on what we would call the infrastructure, the power grid, etc. So it's actually two very different threats, but they're both very active threats, right? Because let's say if we were going to go to war with China, well, if they have now taken control of large portions of our electric grid, large portions of our ports, right? They can shut all that down and prevent us from responding to situations. You almost have to look at terrorism in a different lens, right? When you kind of look at the nation state level. So I do think both are a threat, but they're from different actors.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense.
So the Chinese and the Africans are actually using TikTok, and it's routing them to the southern border. So TikTok's like this human trafficking smuggling application right now that people don't actually understand, but that's how they're making their movements. TikTok is telling them how to do the routing. So it's like, how do you get through this city? How do you get to this country? How do you cross this border? How do you get a visa to this country? Where do you catch a flight to get to South America? When you get to South America, what routes do you take? Where do you go to get aid? Where the friendly NGOs that'll assist you, all that type of stuff is inside and being used in TikTok, and they're using this as their routing feature.
Wow.
Almost like we would use ATAC.
I mean, this has been recently in the news. Do you think we should ban TikTok?
I think we should ban TikTok because it's a spy collection platform. I would never put TikTok on my phone. But I think focusing on TikTok when we have way bigger issues, I have a problem with, right? It's not that TikTok's bringing them through the border, it's you're letting them through the border. But there's also a threat going on, as you can imagine, to our allies. So they captured 30,000, but then there's 70,000 missing total. They killed 10,000. They're able to do this because they're using biometrics, right? Biometrics we left behind. Those biometrics sit in the Ministry of Interior building, right? So I want people to understand, the Taliban are really targeting these people, and that's how they're finding them and getting them. What a lot of people don't understand is kind of within the first year after the fall, the Taliban didn't really have the biometrics up and running. They almost faked it. Then they went to the Chinese and the Iranians and they said, hey, help us fix, we can't get this all working. So they got the system working and then they got it deployed on mobile devices, right? So now it's at the border crossings. So I want Afghans to understand, if you went through a border crossing 6 months after the fall and you were fine, don't assume you're fine now, because they didn't have it working then, even though they pretended it. And I don't know if you actually know why they didn't leave till 10:05. Because Bob lied to them and told them 17 February was responding when he knew they weren't. They thought they were running into 17 February because Bob lied to them and said they were responding, but they never did. On Bob's first phone call to the head of 17 February, his name was Fauzi Bukatif, he said, I don't have any help to send you. I'm not sending you any help tonight.
Bob is?
This chief of base for Benghazi. He did not believe in our QRF or believe we had a QRF or believe they should be used as a QRF. So Bob only wanted 17 February to respond. He never wanted his people to respond. So he lies to his team and says, hey, we're waiting on 17 Feb to respond. He spent some time begging them, but he knows they're not responding. He was told the first phone call to them. The State Department guy says, if you don't come now, we're going to die. That's why they left. But he could have held them there all night because he could have kept lying that 17 Feb was doing a response. 17 Feb never responded with even one body to the Benghazi attacks. And they think that she could get tried for what's on the server, if that makes sense, because that would be the evidence of the activities everyone said she did. And that's what got wiped, that info. It's not really, I mean, there was probably some emails that night about the Benghazi attacks, but that's not why people cared about what was on the server.
And that just got wiped.
Yeah. I mean, there might have been people who got into it. According to an op-ed in the Washington Post today, the CIA shares intelligence with the Taliban, so we have an official intelligence sharing relationship with the Taliban.
It doesn't even seem real.
I can barely take it every single day, especially with just how many Al-Qaeda members are currently in Afghanistan.
So they're doing all this training and stuff in Afghanistan, Al-Qaeda and all these international terrorists. You think they're going to start coming up through our southern borders?
Oh, they've already started. Last year, I thought there was like 20 in a month or something. I feel like maybe in this year it was like 100 or so. I don't know the exact number. If we don't have their biometrics in our system, how do we know they're terrorists? We don't even know what they are. And remember, if they're coming as an Afghan on a fake Taliban passport, it doesn't have the biometrics we had anyway. It doesn't have the name we have watch listed. It doesn't even probably have the ethnicity. If you're Pakistani and you went and got a passport from the Taliban, you're now, they think, assume you're an Afghan.